Guys, we're back. So we're going to look at chapters 5 and 6 in our book. Remember, we're reading Hatchet. Hatchet is the title of the book. The author is Gary Paulson. Remember, author means the person who wrote the book. But now we are actually going to be looking at an adapted version of the book, which means that our chapters are shorter. Each chapter will only be about a page in length. So you're going to get much of the same information, just not as much text. Okay? As soon as we're finished, we're going to look at our question and answer. You can use these, or if you don't have these, that's okay. Just have a piece of paper and pencil, and you can do these with us and just write your answers down. So let's do a quick review. We've already read the first 4 chapters. We're going to start chapter 5. Our main character is Brian, and if you look on the screen, you can see Brian. Brian lives with his mom in New York. His parents are divorced. He is getting ready to fly, or he is actually flying to Canada. Canada is north of New York. Remember our first chapter? We actually looked at a map, found about where New York is, and then saw how Canada was sitting on top of it, which means it's north. Brian was flying to Canada to see his dad when the pilot had a heart attack. Okay, after this happens, Brian is now going to have to figure out how to land the plane. Brian takes control of the plane. He kind of puts the nose down. He ends up crashing into a lake. Brian is okay. He gets out. He swims to shore. Now he's hurt. He says his arms hurt and his legs hurt and everything about him hurts, but he survived the crash. The pilot, on the other hand, did have a heart attack and die. So now we're going to start with chapter 5, where Brian wakes up after he has swam to shore. So let's go ahead and look at chapter 5. Brian wakes up thirsty. His face was sunburned. Brian drank from the lake. He is 13 and alone in the woods of Canada. Brian was hungry. He had no food. Brian remembered his hatchet. Okay, so these are all really important things to keep up with. We know this is Brian. When he woke up, his face was sunburned. You guys have probably had a sunburn before. You know those are not fun. They hurt. They do go away eventually, but they still hurt. He's hungry. He's drank from the lake. It says it right here. He's thirsty. He's drank from the lake. He's hungry. He has no food. And he is alone in the woods of Canada. How do you think he feels? He's probably scared. Wouldn't you be scared? I would be scared. Scared, afraid, lonely. He's not got anybody with him. I bet he's lonely. How else do you think he feels? Okay, good. So let's go ahead and move on to chapter 6 and see what happens now. Brian needed a shelter. Now that's really important. He needed a shelter. He found shelter in the stone ridge. It would keep him dry when it rains. Brian was hungry. He remembered eating turkey at the family Thanksgiving dinner. Brian started looking for berry bushes. He ate berries and fixed his shelter. So these were important things. This one's a biggie. He needed a shelter. He had to find shelter. So he's got that taken care of. He's found shelter. He's found some berry bushes. He's found something to eat. And in chapter 5, it told us that he was drinking water from the lake. So now we know he's got shelter, he's got food, and he's got water. Those are the 3 big things for survival. So we have shelter, and then when he was hungry, he found the bushes. Okay? All right. So let's go ahead now and look at our questions. Now again, if you have this printed out, you can follow along, but you don't have to have it. You can just write your answers on paper with a pencil. It does not have to be on this sheet. Okay? Okay. So let's start at the beginning. What is the title of our story? What's the title of the book we're reading? Is it Flying to Mars, Hatchet, or Twilight? What's the title? Now you can either write down your answer on the paper or just circle it if you have a copy of this. Whichever which one is better. What is the title? Flying to Mars, Hatchet, or Twilight? Let's take just a second for you to write down your answer. You are correct. The title is Hatchet. So you needed to have either circled Hatchet on your paper or wrote down the word Hatchet next to the number 1. So get that done and we'll move on to the next question. Okay. So who is the author? Who wrote the book? Who is the author of the book? Is it Gary Paulson, Phil Collins, or James Patterson? Who wrote this book? Who is our author? Gary Paulson, Phil Collins, or James Patterson? So you can circle your answer on your paper or just write it down. That's right. Our author is Gary Paulson. So you should have circled Gary Paulson or wrote his name down next to a number 2. Ever which one was better. All right, let's move on to number 3. Remember, you can pause the video at any time if you need a couple more minutes to write. Number 3. What does Brian feel when he wakes up? What does he feel when he wakes up? Now, it talked about a couple different feelings in chapters 5 and 6, but remember, these are questions from chapter 5. So what was he feeling when he woke up in chapter 5? I will go ahead and tell you, I will take one of 2 answers, okay? Because I think it's kind of tricky. What was he feeling? Was he feeling hungry, thirsty, or sleepy? So what do you think is the best answer? Hungry, thirsty, or sleepy? I'm going to go back and show you the correct answer. It's how our chapter starts off. Chapter 5 starts off, Brian wakes up thirsty. So the correct answer is thirsty. So you are right. The reason I said there could be 2 possible answers is because we read chapter 5 and 6 together. And over here in chapter 6, it says that Brian was hungry. So these are actually, hungry was actually the answer if it would have been 6, but I'll accept either one because it's kind of confusing. So make sure you have it circled or written down. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the next 2 questions for chapter 5. Where does Brian get water? Now, this was all in chapter 5. Where does Brian get water? Does he have bottled water? Does he get it from the lake? Or does he get it from the ocean? Where does Brian get water? He has bottled water, gets it from the lake, or from the ocean. So circle the correct answer or write it down. You're right. He got it from the lake. Remember in chapter 5, it specifically said in here when he woke up. It says he drank from the lake. So we know he got his water from the lake. Okay, so now let's look on to question number 5. Last question for chapter 5. What does Brian remember? At the last of chapter 5, what does he remember? Does he remember his phone, that he saw a bear, or his hatchet? What's he remember? So circle the answer or write down the answer. You're right. He remembered his hatchet, the hatchet that his mom gave him before he left. Good job. Okay, so make sure you have that written down. And pull up your 3 questions for chapter 6. And we'll get these 3 finished as well. We're almost done. So question number 6 for chapter 6. This is just the next set of 3 questions. What was Brian needing to find? What did he need to find? There's a little typo in there. Pay no attention to it. Same thing. What do you need to find? Did he need to find food, shelter, or the airplane? There's 2 possible correct answers. I will accept either. There's one better answer, but I'll take either correct. So what did he need to find? Food, shelter, or an airplane? Yep. If you remember, right at the beginning of chapter 6, very first sentence, it says, Brian needed a shelter. Now, it also comes down here and says he was hungry and he was wanting food. So I will, of course, take food or shelter, or both if you have them both marked. Now let's look at number 7. This one we're kind of doing a little inferring. Brian was weak in this book, in this chapter. It didn't actually say he was weak, but it pointed to other things that led us to believe that he was probably weak. So why would you think he was weak? Because he was hungry, he was thirsty, or he was tired? What could make you weak? There is definitely more than one correct answer. Can you find all the correct answers? What would make you weak? Hunger, thirst, or you were tired? Write down your answers, or circle the correct answers. Well, for Brian, he was hungry. He was also thirsty, but he was sleeping a lot, so he was tired. Any of these 3 could make you weak. So any of those answers are correct. All right, last one. What type of food did Brian eat? What type of food did Brian eat? Did he find did he find meat, vegetables, or berries? Circle your correct answer if you have this, or write it down. What did he find? Meat, vegetables, or berries? You're right. He found berries. That was what he found. He found berry bushes, and that's what took care of his hunger. Now think about it. What else could he find to eat in the woods? He found berries, which took care of it, but what else could he have found? Well, he was near a lake, so if he had a fishing line and a hook, he might have been able to have caught a fish. He would have needed fire to cook it, but there was other food. There's lots of small animals, but he would need a way to catch one, and then cook it. Of course, there's tons of berries and lots of different plants and things that he could eat. So all of those are just some examples of things he could find to eat. If you were in the woods, what would you find? What would you look for? Why don't you write me one thing down that you would like to eat if you were in the woods? You get that written down? And that's it. We're finished with chapters 5 and 6. We will begin chapters 7 and 8 later. Bye, guys.